Hello, everybody. Hello. It's been a pleasure to listen to the previous speakers who have come before me and to hear your questions. It's been great to understand from people who are really practitioners of crowdsourcing where they feel the frontier of the practice is. And so I'm here to share with you a little bit about how we do crowdsourcing in a vehicle world and what that means. And I hope that there are new questions that come out of that also, because what we're doing, we feel we don't have all the answers to. And that has been the case for the last 6 years as we've been going around and doing this. So what is crowdsourcing in manufacturing, or what is co-creation in manufacturing in a digital age? And that's what we're here to discuss. We think that it's inherently multinational to begin with. And I think that that's one of the most important things. And by being multinational, you're actually reshaping national competitiveness. There are 3 things that we do at Local Motors. They're very simple, but they violate also a very simple rule. Who here has heard somebody say, do one thing and do it well in a business? Hands? Everybody seems to. Well, I'll submit to you that there was a great man in business named Andrew Carnegie who used to say, instead of diversification, I like to put all my eggs in one basket and watch that basket very carefully. So Andrew Carnegie would agree with you, and unfortunately, we have violated both Andrew Carnegie's maxim and your hand raising, at least for the people that have told you that, because we feel that in the age of disrupting businesses that have, for a long time, and in the case of vehicle innovation for the last 100 years, the automotive industry has been doing things in a way where if you just did one thing, you really wouldn't be able to move the needle or change it. So we do 3 things. We design, we build, and we sell. And in order to do that, we came across this funny thing called crowdsourcing. We came across it about 7, 8 years ago, and we started to think, well, how could that apply to vehicle innovation? What would that mean? Of course, we found that if you were able to create a crowdsourced environment for vehicle ideation, you had to do something with it. And originally, we thought, well, maybe we could market those ideas to companies that wanted to buy them. It turned out in real vehicle innovation, where people are real being things that are made to be real, that there was a great deal of doubt, a great deal of skepticism about whether real manufactured products could be the subject of a crowdsourced campaign. Today, I think everyone in this audience would believe that it's possible to do. But when we started, and even today in the halls of engineering and many of the great automotive companies and vehicle innovations companies that are out there, the marketing department does one thing, but the engineering department does a quite different thing. And so that has been a challenge. Now, once you even break through those 2 challenges of designing and engineering and building, then the question is, how do you sell it? What retail channel is the right kind of retail channel? If you think about powering a crowdsourced revolution and all of the great work that goes into it, and then you think about what that would mean in translating that in real-time data to be able to get a product made from the ideas of the crowd, that would be incredible in and of itself. But it would be wasted energy if you didn't put it into the retail footprint before any of that came to light. You want to engage a community to be your consumers. Jeremiah said it earlier this morning that that last and final part of his circle takes the longest and the hardest amount of investment and time. But it really is the most important if you're going to bring a retail revolution. So designing, building, and selling is what we've committed to doing. For right or for wrong, we believe it is the best way to go. It starts with this kernel in the middle, and this kernel is our community. And our community, you would understand well, is made up of designers, engineers, fabricators, and enthusiasts. They're all customers. They're all potential customers. Sometimes we meet them on the co-creation end of things. Sometimes we meet them as customers. Our goal in life is to try to get them to change roles. So if we meet them as co-creators, we want them to become customers. And if we meet them as customers, we want them to become co-creators. This is an old school industry, vehicle innovation. This is your mother and your father and your grandparents. They buy cars. They're not used to this newfangled thing of crowdsourcing, and they certainly don't think it would keep them safe when they're driving around. So we're changing a lot of opinions here in those 2 funnels. So this is our community. They're made up of young and old. They don't have a demographic like you would expect. They're not like that. They are people that imagine themselves to be the folks that had always worked on a vehicle. It might be a skateboard if you're a kid, or it might be a bicycle if you're a commuter in Holland, or it might be a car if you're somebody that drives around the streets of LA. But you dream of doing something to take control of the destiny of how you get from one place to the next. Sometimes it's how you get stuff from one place to the next. So that's what our community is made up of. And there's a very strong DIY spirit in it. A couple of years ago, I listened to the chief information officer of Daimler, and they were just divesting themselves of the Chrysler name. And he got up and he said, in the future of Daimler, people aren't going to buy cars anymore. And we've heard that a little bit today. And he said, and the reason why is because millennials aren't interested in owning cars anymore. Everybody wants to just simply get from one place to the next. I think that was a bad lesson. I think he drew a conclusion off of incomplete data. Today, you find that car companies tell you, from Hyundai to Kia to BMW to Toyota and many other companies, that as the car has gotten safer and more refined, you as the customer should not touch the car because otherwise you'd screw it up. So for liability reasons and a whole host of other things, there has been an all-out war that has been started on you being able to hack a car, you being able to do something. That is one of the main reasons why millennials are not interested in working on cars or owning them. An iPhone's a great way to get information out, and it's a great way to develop something new that you can own. An Android phone is a great way to develop something new that you can impact somebody else with. Linux is a great way to come in and contribute to an operating kernel. Do we really think that young people wouldn't be interested in hacking on a car if they owned the ability to get into it? That's the proper conclusion that I would hope somebody from a company like Daimler would come to, which is millennials haven't lost interest in cars because cars are not interesting. After all, that's the business that they're in. Millennials may have lost interest in cars, just may have, because we don't let them take part in anything other than being behind the wheel. That is a fundamentally different conclusion. And this community is here to say that that is the way that we should address young people coming up in the world. So here's part of our mix in what we do at Local Motors. We do three things: design, build, and sell, and it all happens around our online platform and our physical box called a microfactory. We design from one portion of it, which includes running competitions, hosting projects, engaging people on the thought processes they have on ideas, and seeing which ones float to the top. We then put them into a manufacturing floor environment, and that manufacturing floor builds these vehicles in low volume. We don't build them in hundreds of thousands. We can't. We can't afford to build this business in many countries around the world and be able to get into business and achieve what we're trying to achieve. We are an early precursor to vehicle innovation. We make hundreds and thousands, not 10,000s and 100,000s and millions. But what we are doing is we're delivering customers an innovation early where they can say, I like it or I don't like it, and we can decide whether this is something that needs billions of dollars worth of investment. And then the last piece of the microfactory is the shop. This is our pledge to retail experience. It's both physical and it's online, where you can come in and you can own the thing that's made from our community. We design, we build, and we sell. These are the kinds of products that are designed at Local Motors. These are the kinds of things that I think will come from Local Motors in the future. My bold prediction is we will become the home for vehicle innovation throughout the world. That's my bold prediction. If you want to see a flying car, it's going to come from someone in our community. If you want to see a teleportation device, it's going to come from someone in our community. That's my bold prediction, because we are here to empower them to make that happen. So the bottom line is, I believe Local Motors is playing a part of the maker, the crowdsourcing, and the retail revolutions that are going on, all grown up. We have to be serious. We have to make sure in some ways that if we're bringing a vehicle innovation to market, that you can afford it. That's a method of seriousness. We have to make sure that it's something that would be useful to you. And we have to make sure that it will keep you safe and achieve all of the ambitions that you want to have. We have to make sure that if you're on the line working on building this, that it's something that you can make without hurting yourself. This is real manufacturing, and this is about bringing the power of the crowd all together into doing it. And many times people ask us, they say, well, if you can do this for cars, why don't you do this for furniture and shoes and firearms and buildings and all this kind of stuff? And I say, we'd love to, but there is only so many years in a lifetime. And it's really hard to do this right. It's very difficult to do those three things well in vehicle innovation, but it is my pledge and our 70 people that are at Local Motors, which seems so infinitesimally small for what we're trying to do, to make sure that before we die, we have fundamentally renovated the way in which we do vehicle innovation. So here's a little detail on what we do. This is how fast we do it, this is how cheap we do it, and this is why we do it fast and cheap. How many people here have heard of Tesla Motors? Pretty good. How many people here have heard of Fisker Automotive? Less so. Tesla is a old school car company in new school clothing that makes vehicles the way that we've always made vehicles. They invest $1.5 billion, they build one model, they come out, and they sell it to people through distribution. Now, they've tried to change their distribution model, and for those of you that have been following the news, they have been heavily pursued by the legal apparatus within the United States, at a minimum, to keep them from even doing that innovation. What they really have is they've inspired people to believe that things can be done differently in automotive, and for that, they are awesome. Fisker wanted to do the same thing. They didn't succeed, at least not yet. They've been bought by another company that took their assets and are trying to do something best, and then Chevrolet has been around in the United States for a long time, and they've come out with some new products. So these are three examples of companies that are trying to do things different or innovative. But you can see the way in which they do things look a lot alike on the metrics that you could measure them in terms of cost, time, and brain power. And we flip those around. The one thing I don't put up there is I don't say how many units we could make, and that's where you would see the difference also. They've invested to be able to make millions of units, and then we've invested to be able to make thousands of units. So they are truly comparing an apple and an orange, but for a good reason. I don't think in this age of rapid customer change, which is what we're talking about when we're talking about crowdsourcing, that we need to make 1 million of everything every time we go out to make something, because sometimes customers change. And it's really frustrating if you're that person running an operations line at a car company and you're like, wait, you want this? And now you want that? And then you want this? It doesn't work that well for you to do it. So we're trying to provide a different alternative for the vehicle innovation market to be able to keep pace with our rapid customer changes in desires and technology. So this is what our contribution looks like. And what I'm pointing to up here is that we sort of go through things in this way. You can give us an idea. You can give us a concept that's more fully developed. You can give us your comments on what you do. You can give us instructions on how to make things. Those are how-tos. And then in the end, you can post a project, a full-blown project. And we heard from Ika just a little bit ago that basically when you engage people, not everybody, I love the statement that not everybody is innovative in the same way. I'm paraphrasing, but it's very true. Some people are afraid to contribute to innovation. Whether that's the same thing as being afraid to innovate, I don't know, but you need to give people multiple pathways. And when we started the business, we thought it was linear. That was such a stupid idea. You know, I mean, we thought everybody would put in an idea, and then it would become a concept, and then it would become a project, and then it would become a product, and then we would sell it. Dumb, 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 dumb. Because people aren't the same. And so what we found now is one of the greatest evolutions that I would share you of mistakes that we made at Local Motors and that we've recovered from happily, which is why I'm standing in front of you here today, is let people come into the process wherever they want to. I think that's a learning from a company that's involving crowdsourcing in manufacturing. I really think that's one of the things that we were destined to learn. Because it's very difficult when you're doing something that's so full in its scope. I mean, we go all the way through to service and resale and what do you hand down to your kids? That's a very full scope of things to take on. And if you let people only come in at the beginning and reward them for being the contributor at the beginning, then you'll miss so many other innovations that happen along the way. I think that's a grown-up lesson for what happens in crowdsourcing and manufacturing today. Okay, so a case study, just to show you some things that we do in general. The challenge for us was to design a lightweight motorcycle. For any of you, who here has worked at an original equipment manufacturer for a car company or a plane company or a train company? Anyone? Nobody. Ship company. Okay, there we go. So how long does it take to design a ship? A very long time. Roughly, the automotive industry right now takes 5 to 7 years to get something from a sketch on a piece of paper through the supply chain and all the way into the dealership. And that doesn't count the amount of time that they spend arguing about whether they ought to make it or not. And you might laugh about that, but that's a critical period of time. If I could just decide to make something, Then I could actually go about it and compete on how fast to do it. But it's the decision-making time to get there. So this was the challenge that took that on. We spent 4 weeks running a challenge. 198 projects, pretty good. 25 countries represented. 4 weeks. And it was fully vetted by the time we were done. We then spent 5.5 weeks prototyping and developing the bike. And we brought that bike out after a total of 9.5 weeks of working on things. That bike is now makeable in units of, here's the winning bike. There's the designer of the winning bike. He had about 52 collaborators on the bike with him. His name is at the bottom of every single bike that we make. And it's made on the manufacturing floor in Local Motors and is sold in our shop. We've sold 6 copies of this bike since we made it. It cost us about $20,000 to do the development on. We didn't build the motor, so there's certain things that we took off the shelf and we used. So we are very good at repurposing certain parts that work, but we had the ability to choose from any motor we wanted to use. That's awesome. We were the first people to 3D print portions of this motorcycle that are actually used as mechanical devices in the motorcycle. So we did the full thing from soup to nuts, and we got this bike out, and we sold 6 copies. But the best part about it is, in the first show that we took this bike to, it was only a week old. Just a couple months ago, we took first place amongst all these other bike manufacturers. And we is our whole community. All the people that competed and didn't win, all the people that competed and took part in designing the winning bike, that's amazing. And it didn't just happen once. We went and we just did another show 2 weeks ago. We did 2 of them, and it took second place in both of the categories where it went forward, across hundreds of bikes that it went in competition against. So we're selling them. We're getting accolades for them, and it's no surprise because the community told us they wanted this bike versus another bike. So that shouldn't really be a surprise for us. It's truly a more perfect way of designing a complex device because we were able to make decisions about what to make before we got to the making of it. That's awesome. The amount of money you can save by doing things this way will replace the money that you lose from all of the churn and the change in the way in which you make devices. And I think that is relevant to any manufactured product, not just cars. This is a bike we just designed and will debut this spring. It's a gasoline bike and an electric bike. So you can buy either one. It's called the Cruiser, and it was designed by a young man in Romania, and it's just a beautiful piece of engineering to look at. We crowdfunded this in about 4 weeks. That's crowdfund. And I'll give you the next example we come through. This is the Verrado. The Verrado is our latest electric big wheel for adults. So who here has ridden a big wheel? As a child, come on. Hands? Hands. We have some people that have ridden big wheels. Leave your hands up for a second, please. Who here has ridden a big wheel as an adult? Lower your hand if you haven't. We got a few. Okay, so this is your opportunity, but what it does is it takes that and it really supercharges it literally because we put a 1,000-watt motor on the front of it. So now you can use a drift trike. We crowdfunded this in less than 48 hours. Less than 48 hours. We totally exceeded our goal. So we're not just crowdsourcing, and we're not just making with DIY, but we're also letting people express it in crowdfunding. I really think it's less about crowdfunding, and it's more about pre-selling. And the automotive industry has been doing this forever. They've been saying, I'm going to show you a car at a show, and if you like it, give me a deposit for it. And so I think it's really interesting that we're just exhibiting that when we talk about crowdfunding, because we're saying, if you like it, we'll build it. It's the same thing that's been happening for a long time. So these are our anchor products. And around those anchor products, we sell affiliated products. So another thing that we're doing, much like I loved the discussion that we heard from Roger earlier, is that you can get your community to tell you what else they would want to sell around these vehicles. So we are a passionate community of vehicle innovation, and we don't just focus on the things that we make, those anchor products. We also focus on the things that our community say they want to buy, and those are the affiliate products that we have. And these are what all of our stores look like. I think that we will end up crowdsourcing the design of our stores as we go forward too. So online and physically. This was built to look like the inside of a big airplane. And we sell those things, those anchor products that we have out front, and then we also sell those innovations that we crowdsource from the community on the inside. It gets your mind flowing about what is possible This is what they look like on the front. Today we have them in Phoenix and in Las Vegas, and our next one's opening next month in Knoxville, Tennessee. And the next one comes in Germany this summer. What could be next? If you want it to be so, it could, but our goal is to be able to have 100 up in the next 10 years. I think that means Singapore has to be on that map. There isn't a country that has had such a dedication to manufacturing from a government policy perspective than Singapore. And that's a real reason why I think that between retail, making, and crowdsourcing, this makes a perfect place to be able to have local innovation. So some theory, and I think this is important. I've got a couple of minutes to share this with you, so I'm going to whiz through it. But we are in an age where we've gone from bytes to bits. We're no longer just doing open source software, we're doing open source hardware. The first example of that really came from the idea that no matter who you were, most of the smartest people worked for somebody else. And I think that's true in hardware as much as it's true for software and graphic design. We saw this happen with the British as they came through both the steam and petroleum-based industrial revolutions. The United States came after that, and they employed the petroleum-based industrial revolution to do things about 3 times faster from transformation than the British did. The Chinese came after, and they've done it in about 10 years. So the question I would ask you is, what's the next country, and how fast are they going to do it? Any ideas? Myanmar's an open field right now. I actually don't think it's a country at all, so it's sort of a trick question. Because I think what it really is, I think it ends up being more like this. It's a small corporation or an individual that has an idea about how to disrupt things. That, after all, is the essence of what crowdsourcing is about. I think that the next industrial revolution is in your hands. It's in our hands individually, and it's so much less about national competitiveness. One of the reasons, and I think this is most important for me to look at, is we used to do learning like this. 2 people, an atelier, a master and an apprentice, and we would learn. Today, we do this the same way. 2 people, a master and an apprentice. But what's the difference between this and this? Any ideas? Great question. Great answer. We're not in the same place. Networked. And the reason why is because information used to be transmitted like this, which is only good over FedEx or UPS or DHL. But now information can be transmitted like this, through an email, through increasingly more robust forms of communication, and that changes things. So today, when Stradivarius goes out to make a violin, maybe, finally, after 400, 500 years, it could look like this and be a better violin than what he made because of the wisdom of the crowds that came in and the wisdom of the manufacturers that actually made it possible. So I think what we're talking about is making a revolution, making it in a box that's small enough for you to follow, making it something that can avoid the unsustainable of always trying to make a million things, making it something that can avoid to inform that mass manufacturing before doing it, making something to avoid the status quo. This is a picture from our microfactory in Las Vegas. And that is really where we are. Now, to give you one last parting shot, what I would say is we gave up on one thing, and that was the desire to only do it in cars. But we didn't start a company to do it someplace else. What we did is we found a first adjacent company that really decided they were going to do things, and I'm here to announce a really big thing. Some of you may have read about it already. You heard that Corky partnered earlier today, that Corky partnered with General Electric in order to be able to give GE better ideas of things to make in your kitchen. And then you also heard earlier today that there was a bold prediction that maybe Marriott or some other large franchise operator would come along and would take the idea of Airbnb and do it for themselves, but apply the lessons that they had learned in soap and cleaning rooms and having affinity programs and doing that kind of thing. Those 2 ideas have just happened in a big industry. GE learned from an Airbnb type operator like Corky, and they said, you know what? We need to do this ourselves. We need to take all of the expertise that we have, and we need to push it forward, learning everything that we have done. And so what they did is they came and they said to us, can we do it alone? And we said, yes, you can. And so they have launched their first initiative to crowdsource and micromanufacture on their own terms, not with somebody else doing it for, and it is called First Build. So First Build launched, it launches in mid-May, and the microfactory opens up in June. You'll see a global announcement of where it is, and I think this is thunderous because what it means is you have a real global manufacturer that's buying off on crowdsourcing, micromanufacturing, and retail. It's going to change the whole footprint. And if you work at Samsung or LG, you ought to be afraid of what GE is doing here, truly. Because what they're doing is they're saying it's not enough to innovate faster. It's innovating with your customer. So take a look out for First Build and what's happening. Thank you very much.